Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Pylon Fantasycast, episode 4. In this week's episode, we are going to be talking about the GOATs and WOATs from week 2 in the NFL. And just to, talk through a little bit of what's been going on in my life the past week. So I've been super sick. I was dying sick on Thursday night. So the night of the Giants-Washington game. Just felt horrible. Couldn't look at a TV screen. My eyes hurt really bad. I think I had COVID. Never got tested, but was super sick. Happy to be back. Happy to be, back able to resume normal life and day-to-day living. So happy with that. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and just jump into the episode. We're gonna kick things off with the GOATs from week 2. GOATs from week 2 are players who went above and beyond and had a huge week for your fantasy team, week 2. Players I think that you should continue to either pursue and try to go get. There's going to be a big 5 and then honorable mentions. And with all that being said, let's just go ahead and get right into the GOATs of week 2. To kick things off, we have the return of King Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry kind of made up for his week 1 performance with his week 2 performance. He dropped 47 fantasy points. He definitely was the top scorer in any format this week for fantasy. He had 41 total touches, 240 yards, and 3 touchdowns. I wish I looked it up because I'm curious as to how many total offensive snaps the Titans had and what percentage Derrick Henry was touching the ball. Because 41 total touches is absurd, and he had 35 rushing attempts. And to put that in perspective, most quarterbacks throw the ball 30 times a week. So, Derrick Henry dominated the lion's share of this Titans offense, and he outperformed by a mile. His next-gen stats, if you're watching on YouTube, you see 8+ D%. Basically what that stat is number of defenders in the percentage of times the defense lined up with 8 defenders in the box. And Derrick Henry rushed with 8 defenders stacked up in the box 48.08% of the time, which is the 4th most in the NFL. And why I think that this is a super important next-gen stat, especially for fantasy, is because you kind of can see how productive a running back truly is despite the defense setting up correctly. So, to put that in perspective, it would be like every time you're playing Madden and you call a run play and the defense has the perfect play to stop your run play. Derrick Henry saw that look and still rushed for over 185 yards and had 55 receiving yards. So, Derrick Henry, why I'm putting this here and why I think that this is so impressive is because usually if running backs are seeing stacked box looks, they don't perform or they have a negative performance. And Derrick Henry had, I think, one of the best games of his career against a stacked box, and nearly 50% of the time he touched the ball. And the next stat I'm going to bring up from next gen stat is the efficiency metric. And for those of you who don't know what the efficiency metric is, you want a low efficiency metric. So basically, a good efficiency score would be 1, because what it is looking at is your efficiency as a north-south runner. So how many yards it takes for you to cover a 10-yard distance vertically. So if you take the ball and you run straight forward 10 yards, your efficiency would be 1. But if you took the ball and got the 10 yards going forward, but you ran a total of, 36 yards behind the line of scrimmage or to the 10-yard mark, your efficiency metric would be 3.6. So you're not an efficient runner. Derrick Henry was the 12th most efficient runner in the league this past week, and I think that this is a performance from Derrick Henry that fantasy owners don't expect week to week because 240 all-purpose yards is kind of ridiculous, but the consensus is you expect Derrick Henry to see at least 25 touches, at least 100 yards rushing, and at least a touchdown. And I think that people kind of put the Titans on the back burner because of the beating they took from the Cardinals. Now, the Cardinals are no slouch. The Cardinals are probably one of the most talented teams in the NFL. They're not well coached, but this is what we expect from the crown piece no pun intended, of the Titans offense. We expect Derrick Henry to be getting, in my opinion, I expect Derrick Henry to get like 27 touches a game because that's what he does. And with Ryan Tannehill struggling the way he has been, he's played two pretty good defenses in the Cardinals. I don't think anybody expected the Cardinals defense to be as good as it is, but especially against the Seahawks, who have a very good defense, I expected Derrick Henry to kind of carry the load on offense, and Derrick Henry saved a lot of fantasy managers this week. And I think that there's no need to hit the panic button on Derrick Henry anymore. He has made up for his week 1 sins, if you even want to give him that. He still had like around 10 points in PPR formats. So Derrick Henry, definitely the GOAT of week 2 for almost everybody who had him. Sorry if you played against Derrick Henry because you probably lost. But yeah, so next GOAT from week 2, we're going to talk about, who do we have here? Cooper Kupp. Now, Cooper Kupp has been flying under the radar and should not have been flying under the radar, if that makes sense. Cooper Kupp is someone that, if you were a Matt Stafford believer like I am, you should have saw this coming. And I'm kind of upset with myself that I didn't draft Cooper Kupp in more redraft leagues that I'm in because I knew that this was coming. I didn't know that Cooper Kupp is deserving of the most underrated deep threat title in the NFL because that has been made more than true. Everybody knew Jared Goff couldn't throw the ball deep, but nobody knew Cooper Kupp could take the top off defenses like he has been the past 2 weeks. Cooper Kupp is the number 2 overall player in fantasy football as of week 2. He's a super underrated route runner, but his deep threat ability it's beyond undervalued, and he's showing that now with Matthew Stafford. What's so impressive to me about, and this is kind of something I try to factor in whether I'm doing power rankings or I'm looking at performances, etc., I always take into account the matchup. And the Colts have a very good defense, a very stingy defense. Cooper Kupp has now played against the Bears, who have a good defense, and the Colts, who have an excellent defense, and has balled out. Each week he's had over 100 yards. I'm not sure exactly how many yards, but definitely over 100 yards each week. Cooper Kupp might finish. This is a hot take, but I'm gonna say it and put it on the record. Cooper Kupp will finish this year as a top 7 receiver, and I have no doubt about it. You can't. Matthew Stafford is a quarterback who can reach any part of the field with his arm, and Cooper Kupp is such an underrated route runner. He's separating. I don't think he's separating at a crazy rate, but he's averaging over 3 yards of separation, which is very good. It's definitely like the top percent, except for the few outliers of like KJ Hamler, who has like 2 targets and they're just bombs down the field with blown coverage. But Cooper Kupp, among all the receivers who see frequent like clusters of targets, have a good volume in targets. Cooper Kupp has an amazing separation rate, and he is someone who just completely, in one-on-one man coverage, Cooper Kupp is open down the field more often than he's not. He just needs to get the look. And now that you have this Rams offense that's firing on all cylinders, with Darrell Henderson being a more than functional real-life running back and a more than functional fantasy back, plus with Robert Woods, who still is a good target, and he's not performing to his ADP in fantasy, but Cooper Kupp is reestablishing himself as the number 1 wide receiver for this Rams offense. And Matthew Stafford this is like a match made in heaven, because teams do not have an answer for this yet. The Colts have a very good defense. They last year their defense really carried them to the playoffs with Phillip Rivers under center. But now you have Cooper Kupp, why this is so impressive to me, and I know I'm kind of talking in circles here, but this was a very impressive performance to me because I'm super high on the Rams. The Rams have been my favorite to win the NFC since before preseason, but now with the emergence of the explosiveness of this offense, explosive plays is how you win in the NFL. It is, and I know it's not really a fantasy talking point, but Cooper Kupp is the explosive player in this Rams offense, which is why he's now so appealing in fantasy. I'm trying to trade for Cooper Kupp in every league I can, and I know nobody's going to move him now, but when the Rams need an explosive play, they are now looking to scheme Cooper Kupp down the field. So Cooper Kupp is a GOAT for week 2. I think he's going to be he will be a GOAT for the rest of the season. If you drafted Cooper Kupp, you struck gold. I'm very upset with myself for not drafting him because I knew that this was coming. But anyway, next GOAT for this week, we have Henry Ruggs. And I'm super happy about Henry Ruggs because this was one of my favorite sleepers. I wasn't as vocal about it as I should have been, but this was one of my favorite sleepers for this season. I know Bryan Edwards has been getting a ton of hype because he was a sleeper kind of last season for 2020 that was derailed by injuries. Excuse me. And there was a lot of hype on Bryan Edwards coming into this season. But I started to get on the Henry Ruggs hype train when reports from Derek Carr were coming out about Henry Ruggs. Just constantly saying he's a new receiver. His routes are unbelievable. He's still just as fast. And Henry Ruggs is someone where, like, kind of similar to Cooper Kupp, he's a player where he's just going to take the top off of a defense. He's that type of scheme fit where you send him down the field to open up underneath for your other receivers, for your Bryan Edwards, for your Robert Woods, to continue on with the Rams analogy. But Ruggs is one of my favorite sleepers because he was the fastest player. He's one of the fastest receivers in the NFL, but he was kind of a crappy route runner. And now that he's coming into his own as a route runner, he's that much more appealing because his target volume is going to go up, but he's still that good as a deep threat. But now that you can't just game plan of, oh, Henry Ruggs is just going to run down the field, let's make sure that we cover him. Now you have to account for him opening up the field underneath or going deep. He's becoming that much better, and he's still that player where at any point in the game, if the Raiders need an explosive play, they're either looking to Darren Waller or Henry Ruggs. And this is why I'm kind of, if you don't have Henry Ruggs, like, I don't think people are going to be as glued to Henry Ruggs as they would Cooper Kupp. So try to make trades for Henry Ruggs if you can, especially in dynasty formats, because he is a sophomore receiver and he's someone who I thought would take a sophomore step, but I didn't expect the Raiders to be as good as they are, and I didn't expect their offense to be as good as it's becoming. Because I have no faith in John Gruden, and if I'm wrong about that, I'm wrong about that, but I still have no faith in John Gruden. But Derek Carr is playing at an MVP level, and Henry Ruggs seems to be becoming one of his favorite targets besides Darren Waller. So for those reasons, I'm becoming super high on Henry Ruggs. I think Henry Ruggs is going to continue to shine. He had 22 fantasy points this week in PPR formats, I think. He had the game-winning touchdown at the end of the game. They just, like I've talked about, he is the player who's going to take the top off. And if you have single high coverage, if you have man-to-man coverage, single high safety, they're going to throw it to Henry Ruggs when they need an explosive play because he's fast enough to beat the man-to-man coverage, and he's fast enough where the safety's not going to get to him. So I think that Henry Ruggs is going to play a critical role in this Raiders offense, especially when the Raiders need a big play. They're going to look to Henry Ruggs over anybody else now. So for those reasons, I'm getting super high on Henry Ruggs. I was super high on Henry Ruggs going into the season, but keep an eye on Henry Ruggs. If you can, make a trade for him. If not, if you want to wait on him, go ahead. But I would make the move now before it's too late because he had a good week 1. He had a great week 2, and even in week 1, he was pretty quiet throughout the week against the Ravens on Monday night. He was pretty quiet throughout the game. And then when the Raiders needed explosive plays, they were targeting Henry Ruggs. So Henry Ruggs, it might not see 10 targets per game, 11 targets per game, but why he's appealing is because now when they need a chunk play, when they need to gash a defense, they're going to look to Henry Ruggs. So for those reasons, I'm jumping on Henry Ruggs. I've been trying to jump on Henry Ruggs all season, but jury's kind of getting out on him, so I want to make a move on him now. But the next GOAT for this week, Kyler Murray. So I had Kyler Murray pegged as the QB1 for this season. I thought he was going to take that step for fantasy, and he's taking the step, and it's kind of getting ridiculous. The plays he's able to make, I mean, they're really, like, you watch the memes of people getting exposed on Madden and then someone throwing their controller through a wall. Like, Kyler Murray's doing that in real life. And one of the things that is appealing about Kyler Murray is obviously there's the rushing upside, but he just threw for 400 yards on the Vikings. And I don't think anybody ever expected him to throw for 400 yards because he's had games where he's put up 400 total yards. And, like, that's great because you want the passing rushing split for fantasy. But now he's throwing for 400 yards, and they have the emergence of Rondale Moore, who their rookie, their second-round pick, who is a better Christian Kirk, in my opinion. I think that this Cardinals team, and I've said this if you follow the channel, if you follow the Pylon Cam NFL coverage podcasts, I think that the Cardinals are really the most talented, one of the most talented rosters. Definitely an underrated offense in terms of just raw talent. And Kyler Murray is like playing out of his mind. And now that their defense is good enough to keep their offense on the field, we're going to see more of Kyler Murray, a higher volume for the Cardinals offense. And they don't run the ball, which is great for Kyler Murray and these receivers in A.J. Green, DeAndre Hopkins, Rondale Moore, Christian Kirk, because when they need to run, it's coming through Kyler Murray. They're not really looking at Chase Edmonds. James Conner's irrelevant, and they have Eno Benjamin, but they don't have a good running back. So if they need to run, they're kind of relying on Kyler Murray to just take a shotgun snap and go make a play, which great for Kyler Murray. These are the reasons why it's looking like he's going to finish as the RB1. He has 9 total touchdowns and 740 yards in 2 games, which is ridiculous. Cam Newton played 16 games last season and finished with under 3,000 throwing yards. So Kyler Murray is like playing at a ridiculous pace. I mean, he really is playing at a ridiculous pace. I don't think you're ever going to pry Kyler Murray away from anybody. But if you want to make a blockbuster trade, go for Kyler Murray and try to get him. I think this Cardinals team, they did fizzle out. Sorry, that's Siri. They did fizzle out down the stretch in 2021 or 2020, but that didn't affect anybody's fantasy value. They were still a very good offense. Kyler Murray was still a good player. They were just losing games because of Cliff Kingsbury. So if the Cardinals start to lose games, I don't think they will because they're so talented. But if they start to lose games, it's not going to affect the stock of any of these players, I don't think. Because I can't see with Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, who looks like the best receiver in the NFL. I mean, he's just incredible. And Rondale Moore now, I don't think that this is ever going to be a low-scoring offense. Like, obviously, they're going to have their games where they put up 10 points or 14 points, but Kyler Murray is, like, out of this world as of September 20th, 2021. But the next GOAT we have Daniel Jones. And I have been on the Daniel Jones hype train since before the season. I have the Giants favored to win the NFCs. I don't know if that's going to happen anymore because they are just in shambles. But the only consistency, and it sounds so foolish saying this, but look at PFF grades, look at everything, next gen stats. The only consistency on this Giants team is Daniel Jones. And one of the things I harped on for so long because of the hype that Jalen Hurts was getting, for the reason Jalen Hurts was getting the hype, everybody was going nuts about Jalen Hurts' rushing upside. And my point as to why Daniel Jones could be just as appealing, he's a more accurate quarterback. He doesn't run as much, but when he does run, he will gash you. He had 95 rushing yards week 2 against Washington. And Washington is a great defense. People are, you get noticed by winning games. Everybody, especially in primetime. That's how you get noticed. That's how people start talking about you, is because on primetime, everybody's watching. Daniel Jones has the highest completed air yards through 2 weeks at 9.2 yards per attempt. Russell Wilson is at number 2 with 8.3 yards per attempt. In week 2 against Washington, Daniel Jones could have had 5 touchdowns if it weren't for one, a pretty much universally accepted baloney holding call on a 60-yard touchdown run he had. He had the pass interference throw to Kenny Golladay that would have been a touchdown. Darius Slayton dropped a touchdown. That's 3 touchdowns that were taken away from him. And he had a rushing touchdown and a throwing touchdown to Darius Slayton. He led the Giants team in rushing with 95 yards. So he's finished week 2 with over 300 total yards. He is the number 2 graded passing quarterback according to PFF, behind only Tom Brady. And in an offense that's not clicking, and in an offense that the Giants are looking to find their franchise quarterback, and if the reports are true of what the Giants players say about Daniel Jones is he's this insane competitor, he is going to continue to do everything he can to try to win games by himself. And that's where his own personal value is going to go up. We saw it in the Washington game when he was running for his life, trying to make plays, trying to extend plays, trying to get into field goal range. Those little runs of 6, and when he runs, he's averaging about 6 yards per carry. If you don't look at the plays where he gets sacked. If you look at where he is just running the ball, he is averaging about 6 yards per carry, which is very good. That is better than most running backs. So, for those reasons, I'm continuing to be high on Daniel Jones. I do think that this is the breakout year for Daniel Jones. I don't know if the Giants are going to win a lot of games, but Daniel Jones right now is on pace for 4,100 passing yards, 800 rushing yards, along with, I think, around 30 total touchdowns. I have to double check the touchdowns, but he had 2 touchdowns last game. It should have been 5 if all goes according to plan. If Kenny Golladay doesn't get pass interference on him, he catches that ball, it's a touchdown. If Darius Slayton catches the wide open touchdown, it's another touchdown. And if CJ Board doesn't get called for holding, that's a 60-yard rushing touchdown on top of the 95 yards he had. So Daniel Jones is the only consistent factor in the Giants offense, which is why I am starting to look at Daniel Jones as a very viable QB1, because he hasn't thrown an interception in an NFL game since November 2nd of 2020. And if you take away the fumble, week 1, I'm not sure the last time he fumbled, but it was a very long time ago. Well, a fumble he was responsible for because he had 2 fumbles at the end of last season. That one was a toss to Evan Ingram that hit him in the face, and the other one, Wayne Gallman botched a handoff, which he gets credited for both. But Daniel Jones has cut down on the turnovers. It looks like they're starting to throw the ball downfield and trust Daniel Jones as a deep passer, which, according to PFF, in the past 2 weeks, he finished last year as 2020 as the best deep ball passer in the entire NFL. And in week 2, he is already the best deep ball passer again, and the Giants have lost 2 games. That's why I'm saying, like, this Giants team doesn't have to win, but Daniel Jones, if the Giants just put up 30 points or 29 points, if you want to get technical, which was the highest amount of points they've scored under Jason Garrett, and they left at the very least, 11 points off the board, which I think Daniel Jones gets, in fantasy, gets credited for at least 11 of them, and he finished with 29 points. If he throws a touchdown to Kenny Golladay, if Darius Slayton catches the ball, and if that run doesn't get called back, I think he finishes with close to 50 fantasy points for week 2, because he finished with 30. So Daniel Jones is available all over waiver wire and redraft leagues. This is a player, it can't hurt to just stash him because he is the Giants' offense. Saquon Barkley's still not running the ball well. He only had 1 run of 40 yards. If you take that run away, he had 16 attempts for 12 yards. Or 12 yards for 16 attempts. So, win or lose, this is looking like a breakout year for Daniel Jones. And I know everybody's going to laugh at that, but I'm just reading numbers and trusting what my eyes say. So, for those reasons, those are my 5 big goats for week 1. Let's talk about honorable mentions, or week 2, sorry. Tom Brady. Tom Brady put up 28.64 points in week 2. He had 5 throwing touchdowns. He's 57 total points on the season. He's the QB3. Rob Gronkowski is back. It's like he took a time machine from 2016 to 2021. He's the tight end 2 on the season. He had 19.9 points against Atlanta, 48 total points. He's playing out of his mind. DJ Moore is the most reliable receiver in the Panthers offense. I knew DJ Moore was good. I didn't know he was this good. I thought Terrace Marshall would kind of cut into some of his share. And Terrace Marshall's looked good. He just needs to catch the ball more, but we're not going to talk about Terrace Marshall. DJ Moore finished with 21.9 points, 37.3 points on the season. He's playing as a wide receiver 15 as of right now. Tony Pollard, is playing well above his ADP. And this is someone who I expected to have a very big split into Zeke's workload. That's why I didn't like Zeke as an RB1. I was staying away from Zeke in every league in round 1. Tony Pollard finished with 23 points. He has 31.3 points on the season. He's the RB9. And you could pick him up off. He might have got drafted, but you could probably definitely not anymore by the time this video comes out. But you might be able to get him off waivers still. I would trade for him. You could probably get him on a bargain deal, and he is basically splitting 50-50 with Zeke, and he is dominating in the passing share. Zeke is not getting really any passing volume. It's all going to Tony Pollard if they are going to pass the ball to a running back. So I'm taking Tony Pollard. I'm trying to pick up Tony Pollard wherever I can. Super sleeper pick, Sterling Shepard. I don't think really anybody saw Sterling Shepard playing this well. I think that basically the only people that have Sterling Shepard in leagues are like Giants fans or Giants fans who have been paying attention to reports, because they did move. It was very well known they're moving Sterling Shepard to the slot, and Sterling Shepard did come out and say multiple times, I'm going to be the guy on third down. And Sterling Shepard finished week 2 with 17.5 points. He's the the running back 9 as of week 2, and has 41.8 total points. He is seeing just a lot, like the lion's share of the Giants' targets. They're not throwing to Kenny Golladay. They have yet to use Kadarius Toney. They're not using Saquon Barkley yet. And Evan Ingram isn't playing. So Kyle Rudolph is taking a few targets. Kenny Golladay is taking a few targets, but majority of the targets are going to Sterling Shepard, particularly on third down. And the Giants play a lot of third downs because they are not a good football team. So for those reasons, I would move for Sterling Shepard if you can. Especially if he's on a Giants fans team, like in your local league, you're not going to get him. You might be able to convince someone he's not going to continue this pace, but it looks like he might. So go out and try to get Sterling Shepard. You might be able to get him for cheap. Sam Darnold. I have Sam Darnold on this list because he's throwing for 300 yards per game. He's not running as much as I thought he would, but it's only his second week in this offense and in this scheme. So I think he's still trying to adjust to it. I think once he gets more comfortable, he's going to start moving on his own. He's a very athletic quarterback. It's really underrated. But he had 18.9 points in week 2. He's thrown for 300 yards. He has a passer rating of about 100 over the past 2 weeks. He's a QB 14 right now. And Matt Rule is a very good offensive coach. So this offense is going to continue to get better as Sam Darnold gets more comfortable. So this is a player that you probably could get off waivers. I would stash him if you were struggling at quarterback. If you drafted like Zach Wilson or even Trevor Lawrence, who's been struggling, I would just stash them and take Sam Darnold and start starting him, because he's been playing. He's put up 18 points the past 2 weeks, barring a few decimal points. So I really like Sam Darnold. I think he's going to start throwing more touchdowns too. There was a good bit that were dropped against the Jets, and they just kind of gashed the Saints. So Sam Darnold, and this is a big thing for Sam Darnold, a lot of Christian McCaffrey's volume comes through passing. So if Sam Darnold throws a little dump off to Christian McCaffrey and he takes that 70 yards, that's a 70-yard touchdown for Sam Darnold. So that's an added perk to Sam Darnold. So for those reasons, I like Sam Darnold. I think he's going to get better. I got to put him on the MVP list because he's just continuing to outplay his ADP. Some people didn't even draft him, and he's still playing better than like Josh Allen as of right now. I'm not saying he's better than Josh Allen, but and then the last honorable mention, Derek Carr. I really like Derek Carr. I really like the Raiders. I just hate John Gruden. But Derek Carr is like getting MVP mentions, which I think is absolutely crazy. I knew Derek Carr is underrated, but the Raiders do this every season. Like, they come out, they upset a few people. Like, last year it was the Chiefs. They upset some people, and then they just, John Gruden starts to think he's sweet, and then they just lose games. So, for right now, I'm putting Derek Carr on here because you can get him off of waivers. If you drafted him, it was at the last few rounds of the draft, but he's the QB9 of right now, 22.18 points, 46.18 points total. He's playing very well. So that's going to wrap up the GOATs from week 2 and kind of some players that, have been playing well and you should continue to watch for moving forward, because they could be players like Sterling Shepard could be a league winner and nobody saw that coming. So keep an eye on that. Keep an eye on players like these players that I mentioned. Try to trade for Cooper Kupp. Cooper Kupp is a huge value pick. I would 100% try to trade for Cooper Kupp. But let's talk about the Woats from week 2. And these are players that, stunk week 2, and I am now hitting the panic button on them if I own them because I either drafted them really high or they have stunk for the past 2 weeks, or their situation is getting worse. So with all that being said, these are the players I'm hitting the panic mode on for week 2. Starting with Brandon Aiyuk. I have no idea what happened to Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk was a player that Kyle Shanahan traded up for. And Brandon Aiyuk produced with CJ Beathard and Nick Mullins, and now all of a sudden things are back to normal in San Francisco, and they have just completely unplugged Brandon Aiyuk from the offense. He has 1 reception on 2 targets for 6 yards in 2 weeks, and he didn't have any on week 1. I don't know what's happening behind closed doors to Brandon Aiyuk and Kyle Shanahan. This is a player that I have him in a lot of leagues. I thought he was going to go I thought he had nuclear upside this season. I am afraid to let him go, as in cut him in redraft formats. I'm definitely not going to cut him in dynasty formats, because I don't know what's going to happen with him yet. But in redraft leagues, I'm really thinking about cutting him because they're not using him. And I don't know what happened, like if he's just a jerk behind closed doors or he's like a selfish locker room guy, but this is someone whose talent is crazy. I mean, he was producing anytime the ball was in his hands, and now they're just phasing him completely out of the offense. It doesn't make sense. So, Brandon Aiyuk, I've hit the panic button on. I have no idea what to make of him anymore. I don't know if he's even going to come back into the offense, but I think you have to hold him because his talent level, if you put him on waivers, he's going to be the most talented receiver on waivers. It just is a matter of why are they not using him? Is he being punished for something? If anybody knows what's happened to Brandon Aiyuk, please comment below because I'm lost. I'm lost with him. The next vote from week 2, and I have also hit the panic button on Clyde EdwardsHelaire. Clyde EdwardsHelaire is definitely a gamble, in my opinion, where he was being drafted. But the Chiefs are the most explosive offense in the NFL. They wanted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Patrick Mahomes wanted Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They want to use him more in the passing game, and he's not getting any looks in the passing game. He's 118 total yards through week 2. He's not getting any goal line looks, which is horrible because that was the big knock from year 1 for Helaire, that he needs to be more efficient on the goal, in the red zone, on the goal line. They're not even putting him in the red zone offense, the goal line offense. And he just lost the game-losing fumble to the Ravens last night. So I think that fumble is going to have huge ramifications. I think that fumble is the tipping point where he is now going to be nearly completely phased out of the offense. I hope I'm wrong. But Andy Reid running backs have always been very good in fantasy. For as long as Andy Reid has been a quarterback, a head coach, Clyde Edwards-Helaire might be his first round running back that he has drafted. I'm not sure about that. But it makes no sense as to why they can't make Helaire work. I think he's a good running back. I think he's a great player, but he just does not fit this offense, because the other thing is, it would be one thing if he was like a Josh Jacobs style runner where he's just going to put his foot in the ground and run and throw people off of him until he gets 5 yards. But he's not. He's an elusive back that you would think would fit into that passing scheme of, hit your check down if the explosive play isn't there and go. But I think the problem is, and why Clyde Edwards doesn't work and why I thought he was a gamble to begin with, is Patrick Mahomes will make someone open eventually. He's not the type of quarterback or the type of player to go check his check down and throw it to Helaire on a dump off and let him work. That's not how he works, because if you watch that Ravens game, there were plenty of times where Helaire was schemed open with multiple yards of green in front of him with no defender. But Patrick Mahomes is finding someone. He's finding McCole Hardman. He's finding Tyreek Hill. He's finding Travis Kelce. So for those reasons, they don't need Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Even if Andy Reid's scheme works, which if you watch the tape back, it looks like it does for Helaire. Patrick Mahomes just doesn't think that he is the best option to throw to. And he's not the type of player where he's getting through, busting off long runs, or a big yards after contact guy like Leonard Fournette used to be, or Derrick Henry is. He's not that type of player. So I'm panicking on Clyde EdwardsHelaire because I don't know what his fit is in this Chiefs offense. Because Patrick Mahomes just plays like he doesn't need him. And I would say, like, they don't scheme for him to get open, but if you watch the plays back in that Ravens game, there's plenty of times where they send Hilaire on, like, a little out route into the flat, and there's nobody around him. But Mahomes is either running himself or finding someone down the field to throw the ball to, so I don't know, man. For those reasons, I'm out on Hilaire. I think the fumble too is going to have a huge ripple effect. I don't think he's going to see nearly as many attempts on the ground as he did, and they're giving the ball to I think Damian Williams is their other back in the goal line in the red zone, just as to punch the ball in from the 2-yard line. So I'm out on Hilaire. I think that he might have some value, but I would bench him until further notice because he's put up like I think a combined 15 points in the past 2 weeks. Like, it's not good for someone who you drafted probably in the 3rd or 2nd round. Next player I'm panicking on. I mean, this is someone I'm not panicking on because I haven't drafted them, but Corey Davis. I have probably talked about Corey Davis in almost every video I've released because this is the player I am so 100% positive I am right about. And I have been 100% right so far in the first 2 weeks of the NFL. I said Corey Davis was going to be good week 1 against the Panthers. I said he was going to have under 5 points against the Patriots. And I was right about both. He had 24 points or 26 points, maybe 27 points, depending on whatever, type of format you're in, week 1 against the Panthers. And he had 2-point-some points week 2 against the Patriots. And this schedule for the Jets is no cakewalk. They play a bunch of tough secondaries. And Corey Davis is not a wide receiver 1. I have bet on Zach Wilson's struggles since week 1. I said Zach Wilson, if you watch his tape back, and I'm only counting plays where the ball touched a defender, so it should have been a turnover. Zach Wilson had an interception, a fumble that he recovered week 1. He should have thrown 4 interceptions week 1. Those errors were publicized week 2 against the Patriots, which I predicted which I said Corey Davis is not going to play well because he's not a wide receiver 1. He's going up against a great secondary, and Zach Wilson is going to struggle mightily in that game, which all came to fruition. Now they have to play another great secondary in the Broncos week 2. Then they have to play the Titans, which isn't as good, but I still think Zach Wilson is going to struggle that game. Then they play the Patriots again, the Colts, and then the Bills and the Dolphins 2 more times. And those are just some of the games they play. I didn't even look at all of them. Like, get away from Corey Davis. Sell him while you can. I'm telling you. I feel like someone who is advocating for the end of the world. Get rid of Corey Davis. He is not a good football player. He's not going to produce for you in fantasy football. Sell him while you can. I promise you, this is what's going to happen. He is not going to put over 25 more points. Maybe when they play Atlanta, that'll be the last time he puts up over 20 points. But the past 2 weeks, the Jets have played football. The lion's share of Zach Wilson's numbers have came in garbage time. He, going into the 3rd quarter, had less than 100 yards. He finished the first half with 3 interceptions. Now they're playing the Broncos, who their worst receiver is going to be going up against Patrick Surtain, who is playing like the best defensive rookie in football right now. Get rid of Corey Davis, because after this week, he's going to put up another dud of a game, and his value may never rebound. Get rid of Corey Davis while you can. Please, I'm begging you. The next person I'm panicking on, not really because I kind of already traded him in every league I had him. I wasn't super high on him coming out of college, but Trey Sermon. I'm not high on Trey Sermon because he went to the 49ers, and the 49ers always are a running room by committee, and these were the red flags I saw, and now I'm like, oh crap, what's going to happen? First red flag he played well in the preseason. So let me back up and say, like, he played decent in the preseason. I thought he was going to be the backup to Mostert. Like, I knew Mostert was going to get hurt. You could go back and check the week 1 start, sit, sell video where I said sell Mostert because he is going to get hurt. And he got hurt in the first quarter of week 1 and now he's out for the rest of the season. I thought Sermon was the guy they wanted to be the backup because they traded up to get Trey Sermon. But he was a healthy scratch week 1, which made no sense to me. I had no idea why they did that. And then you had Elijah Mitchell rush for 100 yards week 1, which was like, oh crap. You have this kid they drafted in the 6th round who now is, not a healthy scratch and just balled out as their lead rusher in Mostert just got hurt. Week 2 rolls around. You have the expectations for Mitchell, and now you have Trey Sermon who comes into the game, fumbles immediately, and gets a concussion. So I'm kind of panicked on Sermon because it looks like Mitchell is going to be the guy. However, you might get away with holding on to him. I would definitely hold on to him in Dynasty Leagues, but you could get away with holding on to him in redraft leagues. It doesn't look like it's a bad concussion, but he is their 3rd round pick, and they did trade up to get him. Now, granted, with what we're seeing with Brandon Aiyuk, apparently that doesn't matter. If you trade up to get someone, you could just nix them for being a bad locker room guy. But with Sermon, I think Sermon needs to have a huge bounce back game whenever he's off of the concussion. And I think they're going to give him the opportunity. I just think his opportunities are now going to be limited, and they're going to look to use him just as a goal line guy. So what I'm kind of seeing and what I'm kind of predicting is this is going to be similar to the Patriots backfield, and you're going to have Elijah Mitchell be the Damian Harris role, where he's going to be the guy on, any run play at any point in the field, on on long distance runs if they run on first down. And then you're going to have Sermon be the Ramondre Stevenson on goal line and short distance runs, and that's going to be it. So I'm kind of nervous. I think it's kind of dumb to be as panicked about Sermon as I am, but this is someone who I just think that why I put him on this list is because the chips are slowly starting to stack against him, more and more so. So for those reasons, I put Sermon on the panic list. If you disagree with me, comment below. If you're listening on Spotify, go to YouTube and comment below. But let's talk about the last person on my panic list, which is Ezekiel Elliott. So you could be sitting there listening and thinking, well, Zeke had a good week 2, and week 1 was kind of a fluke. Here's why I'm panicked on Ezekiel Elliott if I were to own him, because I don't own him because I had my reasons to avoid him going into the season. And to give a short recap, because if you've been following the channel, you know why I don't like Ezekiel Elliott, why I didn't like Ezekiel Elliott. But basically, to put it in short, if you don't believe in the power of the media, Ezekiel Elliott is the only player who moved up draft boards because he's a Dallas Cowboy, and because reports were coming out of Zeke looks faster. Zeke looks slimmer. He's dominating training camp. He should. Again, I've said this so many times on this channel. Zeke should have been dominating training camp. He is a great player behind a good offensive line playing against a bad run defense. That means he should be playing well. He did have a good game against the Chargers. The Chargers don't have the best defense, but he did, play well against the Chargers. But here's why I'm panicked on Zeke if I were to own him in any leagues. I probably had spent a first-round pick on him, which I didn't, obviously, since I don't own him, I did not think was worth the price. And his snap share is super low. Compared to the other first-round picks, for instance, Najee Harris. Najee Harris is playing over 90% of snaps for the Steelers. Whether he's getting the ball or not, he's on the field 90% of the time. Ezekiel Elliott is not even getting looked at in the passing game. He's averaging 2 targets per game, I think. It's a rough number, but the point remains, for those first-round guys like Christian McCaffrey, Kamara, Dalvin Cook, they're all getting looks in the passing game, except with the few exceptions of Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, those guys. Those are the only 2 I can think of off the top of my head that are being drafted in the first round. Zeke, to me, isn't efficient enough to produce without his passing volume. That's why I didn't like him, and I predicted, I don't want to say I knew because I really didn't, but I did predict that Pollard was going to have a 40% split with Zeke. But the reason why the Pollard split is more deconstructive for Zeke's value, being a first-round pick, is he is dominating the passing volume. He is completely owning the passing volume in that offense. And that offense seems to be 100%, since Mike McCarthy is no longer calling the plays, a pass-first offense. And even in the instances where they want to run, or want to pass, they're throwing it to Pollard. And if they're not throwing it to Pollard, there's still a 50-50 shot they run it to Pollard. So Pollard is the one taking most of the volume, and Zeke is kind of being phased out. It's still week 2, and I think Zeke is going to be a player where he's going to have those games where for certain he's going to have over 20 points, and he's going to probably have around 10 points per week. But why I would be panicked on him is, okay, I spent my first-round pick on him, and the guy I'm losing to spent a 14th-round pick on Tony Pollard, is putting up the same amount of points. That's why I'm panicked on Zeke. So I would be inherently at a disadvantage in my fantasy redraft league if I own Ezekiel Elliott as a first-round pick or even a second-round pick. So for those reasons, I would try to, there is a market to sell Zeke into. There's someone who wants Zeke. Sell him for someone, you could probably get away with trading Zeke for Cooper Kupp as of week 2, but if you wait, you're not going to get that chance. And I don't even think you will get that chance because Cooper Kupp is playing out of his mind. So I think you could keep Zeke, but why I would be panicked on him if I owned him, and this may just be like a glimpse into my mind as a fantasy owner and how erratic I guess I could be, but if I spent a first-round pick on Ezekiel Elliott, I would be panicking because he's not playing to a first-round value. That is where I would be at. But he's the last vote on this list, last player I'm panicking on. Here are a few dishonorable mentions for the week. Marquez Callaway is being a huge letdown to me because he's a player that I think everybody kind of thought was going to be like a bargain steal that you could get in the 10th. I mean, his ADP was up there with Kenny Golladay. And not to say Kenny Galladay's out there balling, but Kenny Golladay has more points than Marquez Callaway. And definitely more targets than Marquez Callaway. And I think Jameis Winston, very much so, was probably a one-hit wonder. I think he's Jameis Winston. He's going to make mistakes. I don't think he's good enough to make Marquez Callaway a wide receiver one that was worthy of being drafted in the 7th round. Kind of like that the first, Brandon Cooks was the first Texan drafted. His ADP is the highest of any Texan player in the 10th round. I don't think Marquez Callaway is better than Brandon Cooks, and he was drafted before Brandon Cooks for reasons kind of as in Sean Payton is a good coach and he's going to make him work. Maybe he'll be better when Michael Thomas comes back, but Lil Jordan Humphreys seems to be better. Deontay Harris seems to be better. So Marquez Callaway, I think it's safe to say you could cut him, or you could try to trade him, or you could still wait. I mean, the Saints did have 2 very sneakily tough defensive matchups, and even though they destroyed the Packers, Marquez Callaway was getting covered by Jair Alexander, so he's not good enough to get open in that matchup. And the Panthers are a team I've been pretty high on. I think that I said their defense is going to be top 5 next year, but it looks like it's already top 12. It's so young. He did have 2 tough matchups. You could wait to see if he pans out in when they play Atlanta or something. But as of right now, Marquez Callaway had 2.8 points in week 2. He had 5.2 points on the season. He's a wide receiver 101. I'm kind of out on Callaway. I have him in a few leagues, but I might just wait and see one more week. James Conner, definitely get off of him. If you have him on your team, you should never have had him on your team. Waste of a pick. Don't like James Conner, never have. 2.6 points on week 2, 7.9 points on the season. He's the RB52. James Conner is not a good running back. He's never been a good running back. He had good seasons behind a good offensive line and a good scheme with Mike Tomlin. Like I said when we talked about Kyler Murray is going to be the player who, if they need to run, he is running the ball. Or Chase Edmonds is running the ball. James Conner, he's wasted space. He is wasted space. He doesn't really he is Like, I have more confidence in Eno Benjamin scoring points than James Conner. So, for that reason, I'm out on James Conner. Safe to say you can move him, you can cut him, do whatever you want with him. I would have never drafted him. Goodbye. This one hurts, like, really bad, but James Robinson, I'm not moving off of James Robinson in any means. That's not what I'm saying. That's not why he's on this list. He's really just on this list because this is a player who is, like, suffering from bad coaching. He did see his snap share has been pretty good because he's been playing on the field more than Carlos Hyde or any of the other people they have in the backfield. They're just not giving him the ball, and I think it's because Urban Meyer really wants Trevor Lawrence to throw the ball and struggle, which is great for real life. I mean, you're going to kind of throw Trevor Lawrence into the fire and see what you got with him, but it sucks for James Robinson in fantasy. He still had like 9.4 points, which is like not a bad flex option. And he has 16.8 points on the season. He had a really bad week 1 because they did not give him the ball. I think he is going to start to see his his points steadily rise throughout the season and play back to his potential that he played through last week, because this is probably the only player on this list where they're not on it because of their talent. They're literally on it because of how they're being used. So for those reasons, I'm kind of like, he's just a letdown. But hold on to him. He's gonna be all right. DJ Chark. So I think DJ Chark, the reason DJ Chark is on this list for this week is because Laviska Shenault got hurt in the beginning of the game, and DJ Chark did not pick up any slack. They did play Denver, who has a great secondary. They might have like a top 5 secondary in football. He only had 2.9 points. He has 20.5 points on the season. He's the wide receiver 51. But DJ Chark is being outplayed by Marvin Jones. And why that's kind of a letdown is because DJ Chark is like the young receiver that's supposed to be the guy that is supposed to be the tandem. It's supposed to be, or the trio, I'm going to say. It should be Trevor Lawrence, Laviska Shenault, DJ Chark. And what we're seeing now is that it's becoming Trevor Lawrence, Laviska Shenault, and Marvin Jones. So, kind of getting scared with DJ Chark because he doesn't really look that good. I thought he would have more points against... Well, actually, not. I'm not going to say he doesn't look that good, but I wanted him to pick up more of this. Like, I wanted him to become the guy that Trevor Lawrence leans on when Shenault was out, and he wasn't. And that could just be because he's not good enough to outplay the Broncos secondary. But Marvin Jones, I think, had like 17 points in PPR leagues. So, I mean, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about DJ Chark as like a viable wide receiver 4 flex, but he definitely isn't looking like he's going to have 1,000 yards or anything like that on the year. Next player, Myles Gaskin. I was not super high on Myles Gaskin going into this season because when you watch preseason, they did really not play Gaskin with the first team. They played Malcolm Brown way more. They were constantly putting Malcolm Brown in with the first team. And Malcolm Brown, if you remember from 2020, was like almost outplaying Darrell Henderson for the RB1 at one point during that season. So, Tua got hurt this past week, and they kind of needed to rely heavily on the running game because Jacoby Brissett came in. But Myles Gaskin couldn't really pick up anything. Now, again, they did play the Bills and got shut out because the Bills are a great defensive unit. But kind of let down for Gaskin. Malcolm Brown didn't play any better, but, I mean, people were drafting Gaskin. Like, you probably drafted Gaskins in the 6th or 7th round, and Malcolm Brown was picked up off waivers or at the tail end of the draft, depending on how deep your league is. So, Gaskin, just a bad week for him. I'm not panicking about him or anything like that. I kind of knew he wasn't going to play to his ADP, which is why I didn't draft him in any leagues. But kind of a letdown for this week. Ronald Jones, maybe time to just move off of Ronald Jones. You probably could, if you want to buy Ronald Jones, this is the week to get him because you could probably get him for basically pennies. But he had 4.6 points this week. He has 3 points on the season because he had the fumble week 1 and then got pulled. He's RB71. Ronald Jones is a very good player. I do believe that. He averaged 5 yards per carry in 2020, but they are leaning heavily on Leonard Fournette. So if you need a running back and you're if you want a guy with high upside that you could get for basically magic beans, go out and get Ronald Jones, because he just has been playing like trash, and you could probably get him for nothing. So that reason I would go out and get Ronald Jones. If you own Ronald Jones, just try to sell him someone for something, because at best you're probably just going to have to cut him to waivers. And then I wanted to put a tight end on this list because we had a tight end on the other list. So Tyler Conklin. Tyler Conklin, someone who had a ton of upside, a lot of fantasy appeal going into this season. And it just seems like Kirk Cousins does not want to throw any of his tight ends the ball. So he had 3.5 points this week, 11.6 on the season. He's tight end 26. Huge letdown for Conklin. I know a lot of people are moving off of Conklin, totally out on Conklin. So I don't have Conklin. I got offered Conklin in a few trades. I just didn't want him because they made the trade for C.J. Henderson, who eventually will get playing time when he gets phased into the offense. Probably might see an uptick in C.J. Henderson next week. I don't know who they're playing, but so those are the votes from this week. People I'm panicking on. This vote list is not really players I'm totally panicked on. It's more so the first players we spent a lot of time talking about. This list is just kind of letdowns and some people that I'm panicked on. But in the last section, we're going to talk about dynasty investment players. And I think this is a really cool segment that I came up with that I might start doing more of on it in its own videos. But I wanted to put it into this video so I kind of could just test it out. But basically, what this segment is players who I think that you could buy low now and are going to be great investments for 2022. So let's talk about it. I only have a few players on this list, but the first player is Josh Jacobs. I think that people are actually kind of getting higher on Josh Jacobs as the season goes on because the Ravens look like a much better team than people are anticipating. But two powerhouse teams off the top of my head that are in desperate need of running backs that they could kind of just feed the ball in short and goal and short yard distances and let them get yards are the Buffalo Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. Josh Jacobs' rookie contract expires after the season, and he's probably going to move on depending on if the Raiders have good success and make it into the playoffs, or if they throw an absolute bag at Josh Jacobs to the point where he cannot say no. The problem with that is I think a better team is going to do that, i.e. teams that are ready to win now and are a piece away from winning, which are the Bills and the Chiefs just off the top of my head. So I have traded for Josh Jacobs in a lot of leagues, and I'm happy that he's playing well now, but I traded for him when he was getting, people were out on him because he was sharing a backfield with Kenyon Drake. So I kind of got a few bargain deals on Josh Jacobs, but Josh Jacobs is a player where I think if he doesn't play well this season, he's going to be a top 10 back next season if he goes to the right spot. Because if he starts running behind the Chiefs' offensive line or the Bills' offensive line, he's going to rush for 1,000 yards easily. He will be in the same category as the Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor style running backs, without question. So for those reasons, I am trying to as the season progresses in my dynasty leagues, I am just slowly accumulating Josh Jacobs in every league. The second player on this list is Saquon Barkley, because the Giants are in a spot where they're either going to commit to Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley in this regime under Dave Gettleman, or they're going to start over. And if they start over, they're not going to pay Saquon Barkley, especially if he has a pretty crummy year. I don't think he will. I think he's going to bounce back. But usually, players who are coming off of ACL tears bounce back the following year. So since Saquon Barkley got hurt in 2020, he should have a lackluster 2021 year and then be a beast again in 2022. So for those reasons, if the Giants were to move off of Saquon, or if Saquon just regains form, he could go to to a team like the Chiefs or the Bills who need that dynamic playmaker and want to invest in a solid running back. Because I by no means think Saquon Barkley is going to stay back. I just don't think he's that type of player. I think the Giants are using him horribly. If you watch any Giants games, they just run him up the middle. They're not scheming to get him in space. They're not scheming to get him running to the outside. They just run him up the middle like he is Derrick Henry. And it's not working. So for those reasons, I think that this is a player you could definitely buy low because if the Giants don't change, his numbers are going to stay bad. And I literally just witnessed him traded for Darrell Henderson, basically, which is like, why would you ever trade? Like, that's how low you could get Saquon Barkley in Dynasty League. So for those reasons, like, you could go out and buy Saquon Barkley, and if he doesn't bounce back this year, historically, as an athlete, he should have his bounce back next year, and it could be on a better team with a better offense. So for those reasons, I would buy Saquon Barkley as low as you possibly can. The next player on this list is Michael Gallup. I love Michael Gallup, and I'm a huge Michael Gallup believer. I think Michael Gallup is one of the most underrated receivers in the entire NFL. Michael Gallup was coming off of a 1,000-yard season the year before the Cowboys went out and drafted CeeDee Lamb. They also have already alluded to they are sticking with Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. So wherever Gallup goes, he's as skilled of a player where he could be the wide receiver 1 or a very dominant wide receiver 2. Some potential landing spots off the top of my head are like the Colts, the Ravens, the Packers. And I think he would shine in any of those spots. He is injured right now, so you might be able to buy him on a bargain. Maybe not as much so as you would in redraft in Dynasty, but this is a player where like I would just go out and get him to stash him for next year. But the last player I think on this list, the last players on this list are the 2021 rookie running backs. If you've played Pokemon in the past, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne, and Najee Harris all remind me of Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle. And I think that Etienne you could definitely buy for pennies because he is out for the season. But he has Liz Frank. He had a Liz Frank injury, which basically what that injury is the tendon in the top of your foot ruptures and the arch in your heel or the arch in the bottom of your foot collapses. So it's not a terrible injury. It by no means really has any lingering effects. A lot of players come back from it. The only problem is it's a very like rough surgery, and you have to like it takes like 12 weeks to recover from the surgery and rehab. So for that reason, I think when ETN finally gets back on the field, he's going to be a very good running back in 2022. I think that they're gonna use. Like, as we're watching Urban Meyer play with James Robinson, like, as he's scheming for James Robinson, he's using him as a pass blocker and, like, the bruiser back. He's going to give Travis Etienne every look to, in the passing game, on runs where they are scheming to get the ball into space. It's all going to go to Etienne. So, Etienne is a first-round pick. It sucks he got hurt this year. The good thing is it's not a bad injury. He's going to bounce back from it. I would buy Etienne. Najee Harris, if you could somehow convince someone to trade him to you, you might be able to because he's been playing pretty poorly, pretty much due to the Steelers' offensive line, but he is playing 90% of Steelers snaps per game, which is ridiculous. He is literally on the field every single play. So for those reasons, it's only a matter of time with him. Like, he's going to see his volume increase. He's going to become more acclimated to the NFL level, and he's going to learn how to be a better NFL runner. And then last on this list, my personal favorite, Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams, to me, is one of the only running backs in the NFL who looks like he could operate a solo backfield. Like, that is definitely a dying breed in the NFL. He is one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL, and he's seeing more carries than Melvin Gordon is. The Broncos are using Melvin Gordon predominantly in the passing game, and that's no knock on Javonte Williams. Javonte Williams is a great pass catcher, and that we've seen that they're using him more and more in the pass catching game. He's becoming the guy in this backfield, slowly but surely. I have predicted already, I think it's on Twitter, but if not, I'll say it again. Week 3 against the Jets, this is the week where Javonte Williams breaks out. Like, this is going to be his big game where he has over 100 yards rushing or 100 total yards and a touchdown. Like, this is it. He is one of the, like, most physical. He looks like just a smaller Josh Jacobs. That's his player comp to me. He's a Josh Jacobs. His real player comp to me is Marshawn Lynch. I think Javonte Williams is going to be one of those Rumble-style offensive players. They're going to feed him on the goal line. He is going to completely phase Melvin Gordon out of this backfield. And I think this is last year Melvin Gordon's contract. I could be wrong on that, but if it is, expect Javonte Williams to operate solely as a one-man show in this backfield because he could do everything. He's a power back, and he is a pass-catching back. They might look to, if it is Melvin Gordon's last year, they may look to add like a complimentary back like Devin Singletary or Nyheim Hines, like that style player, but Javonte Williams will still have 70% of snaps. Like, he's going to dominate this backfield. He's my favorite player in this rookie class, personally, and I can't wait to watch him. But anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. That's going to do it for the Pylon Cam for this week on the Fantasycast. Coming up this week, we have our weekly power rankings. We have our weekly power rankings. We have the buy, sit, sell, or start, sit, sell, coming out, and then the Monday night recap video that we try to do every week, and the Thursday night. I didn't do the Thursday night recap video because I was like dying of COVID. If I had it, if not, I just had the flu. So there will be the Thursday night recap video on Friday this week, and anything else I think of will be on the YouTube channel, so turn on the notifications. But that's going to do it for me. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for listening. Catch you next week. Peace!